The roar of the A-10's engines reverberated across the tarmac as Major Kara Viper Mitchell climbed into the cockpit, her gloved hands moving with practiced precision over switches, dials and weapon systems, and as she conducted her pre-flight checks, noting hydraulics, avionics, targeting pods and ammunition load, her mind was already running through the upcoming training mission, a simulation designed to test precision strikes against heavily defended targets, because in aerial combat, anticipation, accuracy, and nerve are as lethal as any weapon. And as she taxied down the runway, the chatter from the SEAL observers crackling over the radio with skeptical tones about whether anyone could execute the maneuver perfectly, Kara remained focused, eyes scanning the horizon, calculating wind, altitude and trajectory, because the slightest miscalculation at 500 knots could be fatal. And when she lifted off, engines screaming and turbines slicing through the early morning sky, she immediately engaged in tactical maneuvers, climbing above cloud cover while maintaining a steady mental map of the target zone, enemy placements, simulated anti-aircraft systems and potential escape routes, because in training as in combat, anticipation and preparation define success. And as the SEALs tracked her progress, muttering doubts about whether anyone could pull off the precision strike at the required altitude and speed, Kara adjusted her approach, running simulations in real time, factoring in target movement, wind shear, potential electronic interference and the positioning of friendly units, and when the first challenge appeared, a simulated radar lock coupled with anti-aircraft fire from multiple vectors, she reacted instantly, adjusting altitude, banking sharply while maintaining weapons lock, her hands and mind synchronized in lethal precision, and as tracer rounds streaked past, the SEAL's skepticism turned to astonishment, because Kara's calm nerve, anticipation, and split-second decision-making kept her aircraft stable, weapon systems aligned, and trajectory perfect. And when she initiated the first strike run, releasing a precision ordnance package while accounting for drift, wind, and target displacement, the bombs hit exactly on target, despite enemy jamming attempts, and the SEALs, who had been certain that the maneuver was impossible at that altitude and speed, were left momentarily speechless, whispering between themselves in disbelief because Kara's combination of skill, preparation and nerve had rewritten their assumptions, and as she looped back for a second pass, already calculating corrections, altitudes and potential new threats, she anticipated enemy countermeasures, plotted evasive maneuvers, and maintained perfect weapons alignment, her calm voice over the radio directing wingmen and coordinating with simulated ground units, demonstrating that mastery in aerial combat requires not just precision but foresight, situational awareness and the ability to execute flawlessly under pressure. And when the second ordnance hit with identical accuracy, the SEAL observers exchanged astonished glances, realizing that Kara was not just competent but operating at a level they had considered unattainable. And as the exercise progressed with multiple simulated targets, anti-aircraft threats and moving obstacles, she executed each maneuver with seamless integration of mental calculation, physical skill and lethal anticipation. Because in the cockpit, hesitation is fatal, and anticipation can be the difference between victory and disaster. And when a final, highly complex strike required simultaneous target engagement while performing a sharp evasive turn to avoid simulated missile lock, Kara executed the maneuver perfectly, releasing ordnance with flawless timing while banking, climbing, and correcting for wind, leaving observers stunned, scribbling notes and questioning their own assumptions about limits and possibilities. And as she completed the final pass, engines whining and cockpit systems stabilizing, Kara reviewed every movement, every calculation, and every engagement, mentally cataloging lessons learned, improvements and alternate strategies, because mastery is perpetual, reflection as important as execution. And the SEALs, who had doubted her capabilities mere minutes before, now watched in awe as she taxied back to the runway, calm, composed and deadly precise. And as she shut down the engines, removed her helmet, and smiled at the assembled observers, they realized that no preconceived limits, assumptions or doubts could contain skill, nerve and anticipation, and that Major Kara Viper Mitchell in her A-10 had proven that what was deemed impossible was only impossible until someone with preparation, nerve and lethal precision chose to make it possible, leaving a lingering tension, deep respect and unspoken curiosity about what she might attempt next, because mastery, skill and nerve are eternal, and the legend of the female major who proved the SEALs wrong had just begun to unfold, quietly, powerfully, and irrevocably reshaping expectations, assumptions, and the very definition of what is achievable in the skies under pressure, leaving every observer aware that the impossible is only a challenge waiting for the right operator to conquer it, and that Kara Mitchell was that operator, unmatched, anticipatory, and decisively lethal, while a subtle question lingered. What other boundaries would she push, and who, if anyone, could match the deadly precision and nerve of the pilot who had just rewritten the rules of engagement in real time? The morning sky was a canvas of shifting clouds and rising sun as Major Kara Viper Mitchell pushed her A-10 through the pre-dawn air, engines screaming, systems humming, and eyes locked on a distant training target zone that stretched over rugged terrain, forests, and simulated enemy positions. And as she adjusted throttle and flight path, mentally calculating wind vectors, target distances and approach angles, she anticipated every challenge the mid-air gauntlet could throw at her because, in aerial precision operations, anticipation and split-second calculation are as lethal as any weapon, and when the first set of simulated enemy anti-aircraft batteries lit up the horizon, she executed a rapid climb, banking sharply while maintaining weapons lock, and released countermeasures in perfect sequence, her hands moving with preternatural synchronization across the cockpit controls while simultaneously communicating with ground units and wingmen, because mastery in flight is the integration of calculation, anticipation, and nerve. And as tracer rounds streaked past, the SEAL observers monitoring from a nearby ridge whispered among themselves, doubts giving way to astonishment, because the female major was not merely surviving the gauntlet but dominating it, predicting every threat and neutralizing it before it became critical. And as she threaded through simulated missile locks, dodging obstacles while maintaining weapons alignment, she simultaneously calculated the trajectory of multiple moving targets, adjusting ordnance release points with millimeter precision, and when the first bomb hit its mark, perfectly timed despite wind shear and enemy jamming attempts, the SEALs' astonishment deepened, because they had believed no one could accomplish a flawless strike under these conditions, and as Kara banked for a second pass, already calculating corrections for the next series of threats, she anticipated a rapid series of moving obstacles, including simulated UAVs, enemy aircraft, and shifting terrain, executing evasive maneuvers while simultaneously locking weapons, stabilizing the aircraft, and maintaining mental focus, because in high-stakes aerial operations, mental processing, nerve, and physical execution must fuse seamlessly. And when the gauntlet intensified with multiple simultaneous threats from differing angles, she coordinated with wingmen to create suppressive fire coverage, guided medevac and support elements through simulated hazards, and executed each strike with surgical timing, neutralizing multiple threats while keeping her aircraft stable, efficient, and fully mission-capable. And when a final, highly complex strike required simultaneous engagement of multiple targets while performing extreme banking maneuvers to avoid a simulated SAM lock, Kara executed perfectly, releasing ordnance with split-second timing while ascending, banking, and compensating for wind and electronic interference, leaving observers in stunned silence, their previous doubts now replaced by respect, awe, and disbelief. And as she completed the final run, engines whining, cockpit systems stabilizing, and mission objectives accomplished flawlessly, Kara ran through her mental debrief, cataloging every maneuver, every decision, and every adjustment, already analyzing improvements, alternate approaches, and contingencies for the next challenge, because true mastery is perpetual, reflection as critical as execution. And while the SEALs who had doubted her mere moments before now murmured admiration, she remained calm, composed, and already focused on what might come next, knowing that anticipation, nerve, and precision are never static but require constant attention, adaptation, and execution. And as she taxied back to the base, engines echoing across the tarmac, her presence had rewritten expectations, proving not only that she could execute impossible maneuvers but that skill, preparation, and nerve could overcome even the most skeptical observers, leaving lingering awe, deep respect, and a subtle tension among the SEALs, because they now understood that the female major in the A-10 could achieve what none thought possible, controlling chaos in the air with lethal precision, anticipating threats before they manifested, and demonstrating that mastery is as much mental and anticipatory as it is physical. And as Kara stepped out of the cockpit, removing her helmet, sweat and adrenaline clinging to her, the observers could not help but acknowledge that boundaries had been broken, rules rewritten, and perceptions of what is achievable forever altered, while she, quiet, composed and unflinching, prepared mentally for the next phase of the training, because a true master never stops thinking, analyzing, or anticipating, leaving everyone present with the unspoken, lingering question: what other impossibilities could she conquer? And who, if anyone, could ever match the lethal anticipatory precision of Major Kara Viper Mitchell in her A-10? The sun had risen higher now, casting harsh light across the jagged terrain below, as Major Kara Viper Mitchell maneuvered her A-10 over a simulated hostile zone, engines screaming, targeting systems active, and every sensor flickering with potential threats. And as she scanned the landscape, she detected unexpected obstacles. A series of simulated civilian structures, hidden anti-aircraft positions, and moving vehicles that had not been in the original plan, forcing her to improvise a strike sequence in real time, because in aerial combat, adaptability and rapid decision-making are as lethal as precision itself. And when a sudden alert indicated that an unmapped anti-aircraft emplacement had locked onto her altitude and trajectory, Kara's instincts kicked in, banking sharply, compensating for wind, adjusting weapons alignment, and releasing countermeasures in flawless timing while maintaining focus on her primary target. Because mastery is not just planning but the ability to adapt. Instantly, and as tracer rounds zipped past, the SEAL observers tracking her from the ridge murmured incredulously, realizing that she was not just surviving but dominating a situation no one had predicted. And as she identified multiple moving targets converging toward strategic positions, she recalculated trajectories, release points, and evasive maneuvers, executing a perfect sequence of strikes while coordinating with simulated ground forces and wingmen, because in high-pressure aerial engagements, every variable must be anticipated and addressed instantly, and when the first bomb hit a previously uncharted target, obliterating it with millimeter accuracy, the observers exchanged stunned glances, knowing that what they were witnessing exceeded even their wildest expectations. And as Kara looped for a second pass, she detected yet another anomaly. A moving convoy weaving between civilian structures, requiring split-second adjustments to avoid collateral damage while neutralizing the threat, and with lightning-fast calculations she adjusted altitude, pitch, and roll, releasing ordnance with perfect timing, hitting targets precisely while keeping the aircraft stable and avoiding simulated civilian casualties. And as tracer fire and electronic interference intensified, she maintained composure, continuously scanning, adjusting, calculating, and anticipating, her hands and mind perfectly synchronized, because in the cockpit hesitation is fatal, and adaptability under pressure defines mastery. And when a simulated SAM lock activated on her final approach, she executed an improvised evasive maneuver, rolling sharply, compensating for altitude and wind, and releasing the last ordnance with perfect accuracy, all while maintaining full situational awareness of friendly and enemy positions, leaving the SEAL observers in awe, their skepticism replaced by astonishment, because they realized that she was not only precise but anticipatory, adaptive, and unflinching under chaos. And as the final targets exploded with pinpoint accuracy, Kara ran through a rapid mental debrief, cataloging every movement, every decision, every adjustment, already calculating improvements, contingencies, and alternate strategies for future engagements, because true mastery is perpetual, and reflection is as critical as execution. And while the SEALs whispered among themselves about how impossible it seemed, Kara remained focused, calm, and ready for the next challenge, knowing that anticipation, nerve, and precision are continuous requirements. And as she circled back over the compound to assess the damage, her mental map already expanding to consider additional variables, she executed a series of post-strike maneuvers, adjusting for wind, terrain, and simulated threats, maintaining perfect control of the aircraft while observing every detail of the battlefield below, because mastery is in the ability to control chaos while remaining several steps ahead. And when the exercise concluded, engines humming and aircraft systems stabilizing, she taxied back to base, removing her helmet, sweat and adrenaline clinging to her, and the SEAL observers could not help but stand in quiet respect, realizing that the female major in the A-10 had done what they had doubted possible. She had improvised flawlessly under extreme conditions, maintained lethal precision, and executed complex calculations with split-second timing while neutralizing threats, avoiding collateral damage, and asserting complete control of the scenario. And as she stepped from the cockpit, smiling subtly, they understood that boundaries had been shattered, expectations rewritten, and that Kara Mitchell's combination of skill, nerve, and anticipatory mastery could redefine what was considered achievable in combat aviation, leaving lingering awe, deep respect, and subtle tension among all observers, because the impossible had been accomplished, and they now knew that she could improvise, adapt, and dominate any scenario thrown at her, while the question lingered silently in everyone's mind. What would she do next, and who, if anyone, could ever match the lethal precision and nerve of Major Kara Viper Mitchell in her A-10 under fire, leaving her legend quietly growing powerfully and irrevocably in the eyes of both allies and skeptics, a living testament that preparation, anticipation, and courage can turn the impossible into reality, and that mastery, once demonstrated, leaves an indelible mark that challenges every assumption about what can be achieved in combat, whether in the air or on the ground, in the mind of the observer or the heart of the operator, and that Major Kara Viper Mitchell had just proven herself not merely a pilot, but a force capable of reshaping every calculation, expectation, and possibility with lethal precision and unwavering nerve. The roar of engines filled the pre-dawn sky as Major Kara Viper Mitchell climbed into her A-10, her gloved hands methodically running through pre-flight checks, scanning instrumentation, weapon systems and targeting pods, while simultaneously visualizing the live-fire exercise that awaited her, because in combat aviation, preparation, anticipation, and mental rehearsal are as lethal as any ordnance, and as she taxied onto the runway, SEAL observers muttering skepticism over radio chatter about the feasibility of executing precision strikes under dynamic live-fire conditions, Kara maintained calm focus, her mind calculating wind vectors, trajectory corrections, altitude adjustments, and target acquisition while anticipating enemy reaction times, because hesitation in a live-fire scenario can be fatal, and as she lifted off, engines screaming, she immediately engaged in tactical maneuvers, climbing above cloud cover while continuously scanning for simulated threats, enemy positions, and moving targets, simultaneously coordinating with wingmen and ground units, because mastery demands integration of mental, physical, and technical skill, and when the first salvo of simulated anti-aircraft fire erupted below, Kara executed a rapid ascent while banking sharply to avoid incoming fire, deploying countermeasures in flawless timing, and as tracer rounds streaked past, SEAL observers' murmurs of doubt turned into astonishment, because the female major was navigating the impossible with lethal precision, and when a convoy of moving targets appeared, weaving unpredictably through simulated urban terrain, Kara recalculated trajectories, adjusted release points, and executed precise ordnance strikes while keeping her aircraft fully stable, and as explosions marked each hit with millimeter accuracy, the SEALs were left stunned, whispering disbelief, because she had turned a scenario they believed impossible into a flawless execution, and as she looped for a second pass, enemy units attempted flanking maneuvers and simulated countermeasures, forcing Kara to improvise evasive maneuvers, coordinate suppressive fire, and maintain perfect targeting while simultaneously monitoring friendly unit positions and ensuring no collateral damage, because true mastery in live-fire operations requires anticipatory thinking, adaptability, and absolute control under extreme stress, and when a simulated missile lock activated during a tight banking maneuver, Kara responded instantly, rolling, adjusting pitch and yaw, and releasing ordnance with flawless timing, neutralizing targets while maintaining situational awareness and aircraft stability, leaving SEAL observers blinking in astonishment, realizing that her nerve, anticipation, and skill had surpassed every expectation, and as she executed the final strike, a complex combination of moving targets, simulated civilian structures, and electronic interference, she simultaneously tracked multiple threat vectors, maintained precision targeting and coordinated with wingmen, demonstrating an extraordinary fusion of mental processing, tactical anticipation, and lethal execution, because in live-fire scenarios, one mistake can cost lives and mastery demands perfection, and as the last explosions faded, engines whining and cockpit systems stabilizing, Kara ran through a rapid mental debrief, cataloging every movement, adjustment, and decision, already analyzing improvements, alternative strategies, and contingencies for future missions, because reflection is essential for continuous improvement, and as she circled back to assess the target area, she executed post-strike maneuvers, adjusting altitude, pitch, and bank to evaluate destruction patterns and secondary threats, all while maintaining perfect aircraft control, because the battlefield is never static and anticipation never ends, and when she finally returned to base, taxiing to the hangar with engines echoing across the tarmac, SEAL observers stood silently, a mix of awe, respect, and incredulity washing over them, because they had witnessed a feat they had believed impossible. The female major had executed a live-fire exercise with precision, nerve, and anticipation beyond what anyone expected, and as she removed her helmet, sweat clinging to her brow, her calm demeanor belied the intensity of the operation she had just mastered, leaving lingering tension, unspoken admiration, and the quiet question in every observer's mind: what else could she accomplish, and who, if anyone, could ever rival her skill, nerve, and anticipatory precision in combat aviation? And while the immediate exercise was complete, the legend of Major Kara Viper Mitchell, the pilot who proved the impossible achievable, continued to grow quietly, powerfully, and irrevocably, reshaping expectations, rewriting assumptions, and leaving every observer aware that preparation, skill, and nerve can redefine the limits of possibility, and that in the skies, under extreme conditions, one masterful pilot can control chaos, neutralize threats, and challenge every preconceived notion of what is achievable, while leaving a subtle, unresolved tension, because the battlefield is never truly predictable, and Major Kara Viper Mitchell had only begun to demonstrate the heights of her lethal, anticipatory, and precise capability in the A-10, leaving all who witnessed her performance in awe, respect, and quiet anticipation of what she might do next. Darkness enveloped the training range, the faint glow of moonlight glinting off jagged terrain as Major Kara Viper Mitchell climbed into her A-10, cockpit illuminated by instruments and targeting pods, and as she conducted her pre-flight checks, mentally running through night vision calibration, infrared targeting, and terrain mapping, her mind raced through the additional complexities of a nocturnal operation, because in darkness, anticipation, precision, and nerve become exponentially more critical, and as she taxied onto the runway, SEAL observers whispering over comms about the added difficulty, Kara maintained calm focus, visualizing every movement, calculation, and potential threat, because hesitation at night can turn even routine operations fatal, and when engines roared and she lifted off, the night sky swallowing the aircraft, she immediately began scanning with infrared and targeting pods, analyzing terrain, detecting heat signatures, and anticipating obstacles while coordinating silently with wingmen, because in nocturnal operations, flawless communication and anticipatory action dictate survival. And as the first simulated enemy positions lit up with infrared signatures, she executed precise maneuvers, banking sharply to avoid detection while lining up multiple targets, releasing ordnance with split-second timing, her hands and mind perfectly synchronized to ensure both mission success and aircraft stability. And when tracer fire and electronic countermeasures from the simulated enemy erupted, she adjusted trajectory, altitude, and roll in real time, maintaining situational awareness, coordinating with wingmen, and neutralizing threats, leaving SEAL observers in quiet astonishment, because the female major was not merely surviving but dominating the night sky with lethal precision, and as she detected a convoy moving across rugged terrain, weaving unpredictably among simulated civilian heat signatures, she recalculated release points and executed an impossible strike without endangering collateral positions, demonstrating adaptability, anticipation, and split-second decision making. And as a simulated missile lock activated during a steep banking maneuver, Kara executed evasive moves with surgical timing, rolling sharply, adjusting pitch, and releasing countermeasures while maintaining weapons lock, neutralizing multiple threats simultaneously, and coordinating with both wingmen and simulated ground forces, because in high-pressure nocturnal combat, mastery requires the seamless integration of mental acuity, tactical anticipation, and physical execution, and when the final high-value target appeared in the compound below, she executed a complex approach, descending through cloud shadows, compensating for wind and thermal interference, while precisely timing ordnance released to hit the target, and as explosions lit up the darkness, observers whispered in disbelief, recognizing the impossible had been achieved, because she had navigated darkness, unpredictability, and complex threats with flawless skill, nerve, and anticipation, and as she looped for post-strike reconnaissance, she continuously scanned, recalculated, and adjusted for potential threats, monitoring for secondary explosions, hidden targets, and structural collapses, while simultaneously maintaining perfect control of her aircraft, because in the night sky, vigilance, anticipation, and execution never stop, and when she finally began her return to base, engines whispering through the cold night air, she ran through a rapid mental debrief, cataloging every move, decision, and adjustment, already planning improvements, alternative approaches, and contingencies, because mastery is perpetual, and reflection is as critical as action. And as she taxied to a halt and removed her helmet, sweat and adrenaline still clinging, the SEAL observers could only nod in silent respect, their doubts completely erased, because they had witnessed a pilot executing the impossible under the added chaos of darkness, maintaining lethal precision, nerve, and control. And as Kara walked away from her aircraft, cool, composed, and already planning her next challenge, the observers realized that boundaries had been shattered, expectations rewritten, and that Major Kara Viper Mitchell had proven herself not just a pilot but a master of anticipation, precision, and adaptability under conditions that most would deem insurmountable, leaving lingering awe, subtle tension, and unspoken curiosity about what she might do next, because in the world of aerial combat, no skill, calculation, or nerve is ever static, and she had just demonstrated that preparation, anticipation, and lethal precision can redefine the limits of possibility, control chaos, and challenge every preconceived notion of what is achievable in the sky, while leaving a question in every mind. How far can a single masterful pilot push the boundaries of skill, nerve, and anticipation when the darkness, danger, and stakes are all amplified, and Major Kara Viper Mitchell had already shown that she is capable of doing what few thought possible, leaving observers with awe, respect, and the quiet knowledge that the impossible is only a challenge waiting for the right operator to conquer, and that in the night, under extreme conditions, she alone could dictate outcomes, neutralize threats, and transform every chaotic variable into controlled, precise action, leaving her legend silently growing, quietly reshaping expectations, and irreversibly marking the minds of all who witnessed her lethal mastery in the dark sky. The sun barely pierced the horizon as Major Kara Viper Mitchell prepared her A-10 for the combined air and ground exercise, engines humming, cockpit glowing, systems running at full diagnostic capacity, and as she scanned the mission objectives, which involved coordinating strikes with ground units moving through dense terrain, urban mock-ups, and simulated enemy strongholds, her mind raced through trajectories, engagement sequences, and contingencies because in combined operations, anticipation, precision, and nerve are magnified by the need to synchronize multiple elements under high stress. And as she taxied onto the runway, SEAL observers whispering doubts over comms about whether anyone could maintain flawless coordination under such chaotic conditions, Kara remained calm, visualizing every maneuver, every signal, and every potential variable, because hesitation or miscalculation could be catastrophic. And when she lifted off, engines screaming, climbing above rolling hills while scanning for enemy positions and heat signatures, she immediately engaged in tactical adjustments, coordinating with ground units via secure comms, relaying timing, strike coordinates, and evasive maneuvers, because mastery in this environment requires seamless integration of air and ground operations. And as the first simulated enemy positions appeared, firing both tracer rounds and electronic countermeasures, she executed precision strikes, banking sharply, releasing ordnance, and adjusting flight paths to maintain alignment with moving ground units, while simultaneously monitoring collateral zones and civilian simulations. And as the SEAL observers watched, incredulity replaced doubt, because she was not merely surviving the operation but dominating it with lethal precision and anticipatory mastery. And when ground units encountered simulated ambushes in narrow urban corridors, Kara adjusted her approach angles, coordinated air cover, and provided precision strikes in real time, neutralizing threats while protecting friendly forces, her hands and mind operating in perfect synchrony, because in combined ops, anticipation, nerve, and flawless execution are the difference between success and disaster. And as a convoy of moving targets attempted to exploit gaps in coordination, Kara calculated trajectories, compensated for wind, distance, and moving obstacles, and executed strikes with millimeter accuracy, while providing continuous situational updates to ground commanders leaving SEAL observers stunned at her integration of complex variables under extreme stress. And when a final simulated high-value target emerged inside a fortified compound, requiring simultaneous engagement of multiple targets while coordinating with ground forces and avoiding civilian structures, Kara executed a near-impossible strike sequence, releasing ordnance, adjusting flight path, and directing ground units with split-second timing, while simultaneously evading simulated SAM locks and anti-aircraft fire. And as explosions marked each target hit with flawless accuracy, observers whispered disbelief, realizing that the female major had achieved what they considered unachievable. And as she looped for reconnaissance and post-strike assessment, engines whining, systems stabilizing, she calculated secondary contingencies, ensured no hidden threats remained, and maintained perfect aircraft control while monitoring ground units, because mastery in combined ops requires continuous anticipation and flawless execution. And when she finally returned to base, taxiing smoothly, removing her helmet, adrenaline still coursing, the SEALs could only nod in silent respect, their skepticism completely replaced by awe, because Kara Viper Mitchell had proven that skill, nerve, and anticipatory precision can not only survive chaos but dominate it, control it, and transform every unpredictable variable into perfect execution. And as she stepped from the cockpit, calm, composed, and already mentally preparing for the next challenge, observers understood that boundaries had been shattered, expectations rewritten, and that she could synchronize air and ground operations under the most extreme conditions, leaving lingering tension, subtle fear, and quiet admiration, because the question remained: Who, if anyone, could rival her lethal precision, nerve, and anticipatory mastery? And what challenges could possibly push her beyond the limits she had already redefined? And while the immediate exercise concluded successfully, the legend of Major Kara Viper Mitchell, the pilot who could master the impossible in air, ground, and combined operations, continued to grow quietly but irreversibly, reshaping every observer's understanding of what is achievable under extreme stress, while leaving an unspoken, unresolved tension about the next challenge that awaited her in the skies. Because the battlefield is never static, anticipation never ends, and the capabilities of a true master like Kara Mitchell always leave lingering questions, awe, and quiet fear among all who witness her lethal, anticipatory, and precise command of the air. Engines screaming and instruments glowing, Major Kara Viper Mitchell navigated her A-10 over rugged terrain as simulated enemy fire erupted below, tracer rounds zipping past and heat signatures flashing on her targeting pods. And when an unexpected mechanical alert signaled partial hydraulic failure in the left wing, she immediately calculated adjustments, rerouted power, and coordinated with base command and wingmen, because in a live-fire emergency, split-second decisions can mean the difference between survival and disaster. And as simulated SAM launches and anti-aircraft fire converged on her position, Kara executed a precise series of evasive maneuvers, banking, rolling, and compensating for altitude, wind, and system limitations while simultaneously targeting multiple enemy positions, releasing ordnance with millimeter-perfect timing, and coordinating with ground forces under duress, because mastery requires simultaneous mental, physical, and tactical execution under extreme stress. And when a secondary system failure caused partial navigation loss, she relied on mental maps, radar, and intuition, adjusting trajectory and weapons targeting in real time while maintaining situational awareness of both threats and allies. And as the SEAL observers tracked her progress from a ridge, they whispered incredulously, realizing she was improvising flawlessly under conditions that would overwhelm most, because the female major was not only surviving a near catastrophic emergency but actively neutralizing threats with lethal precision. And when a moving convoy attempted to exploit gaps in her compromised systems, she recalculated strike angles, release timing, and evasive maneuvers on the fly, simultaneously communicating with wingmen to synchronize cover and provide suppressive fire. And as each ordnance hit its target with perfect timing, the observer's disbelief turned into awe, because she had converted a critical failure into an operational advantage, controlling chaos while maintaining absolute precision. And when an unexpected secondary threat emerged, a simulated high-value target attempting to flee while armored positions opened fire, Kara executed a complex maneuver, compensating for hydraulics, wind, and trajectory, while guiding ground units through secure comms, calculating every movement, and releasing ordnance at the exact moment to achieve simultaneous target neutralization and safe navigation, leaving the SEALs speechless because they had believed such improvisation under live fire and system failure was impossible. And as she looped for assessment, engines whining, systems stabilizing, and her mental focus razor-sharp, Kara monitored secondary targets, recalculated potential threats, and ensured no friendly units were endangered, because in emergencies, every decision, calculation, and movement must be flawless. And when she finally executed a controlled landing at base, taxiing with precision, despite partial system failure, the observers could only gape, their skepticism entirely erased, replaced by deep respect, admiration, and lingering tension, because she had survived simulated system failures, live-fire threats, moving targets, and complex coordination challenges while maintaining lethal precision, nerve, and situational awareness. And as she stepped from the cockpit, helmet off, sweat and adrenaline clinging, calm and composed, she already began mentally cataloging the exercise, analyzing every decision, alternative strategy, and contingency for future operations, because mastery is perpetual, reflection as critical as execution. And while the immediate crisis was resolved, the unspoken question in every observer's mind remained. What could possibly challenge her next? Who could rival her skill, nerve, and anticipatory mastery? And how far could a pilot like Kara Viper Mitchell push the limits of control, precision, and improvisation under extreme pressure, leaving lingering awe, quiet tension, and a subtle sense of fear among all witnesses, because she had proven that no emergency, mechanical failure, or enemy tactic could unseat her lethal mastery, leaving the legend of the female A-10 major who converts chaos into precision control quietly growing, reshaping every assumption, expectation, and understanding of what is achievable in the air under duress, while simultaneously planting a question that would linger long after engines cooled and observers dispersed. What impossible scenario could ever truly test a pilot who has mastered anticipation, nerve and lethal precision to such an extraordinary degree? And Major Kara Viper Mitchell had already shown that for her, the answer might simply be nothing. The skies over the rugged training zone were streaked with streaks of smoke and shifting shadows as Major Kara Viper Mitchell climbed into her A-10 for what had been described as the ultimate test, a simulated multi-threat engagement combining live-fire targets, moving convoys, electronic jamming and coordination with multiple ground and air units, and as she conducted pre-flight checks with methodical precision, her mind running mental simulations of trajectories, evasive maneuvers and ordnance timing, she visualized every contingency, every possible threat, and every variable because in an operation of this magnitude anticipation, precision, and nerve are as critical as the weapons themselves, and as she taxied onto the runway the SEAL observers, previously skeptical but now silently awed, watched her with a mix of respect and disbelief, knowing that the complexity of the exercise had never before been attempted by anyone, and when engines roared and she lifted off into the cool morning sky, Kara immediately engaged in tactical maneuvers, banking sharply to avoid simulated anti-aircraft fire, scanning for targets, coordinating with wingmen and calculating every movement, altitude adjustment, and wind correction in real time, because mastery under pressure requires seamless integration of mental calculation, physical execution and anticipatory insight, and as the first set of moving targets appeared, she released ordnance with flawless timing, neutralizing each with surgical accuracy while simultaneously dodging incoming fire, electronic interference and shifting environmental conditions, leaving observers in stunned silence, because they had never seen a pilot operate with such lethal synchronization of skill and nerve, and when the simulated convoy began an evasive maneuver through rugged terrain and urban mock-ups, Kara adjusted her trajectory, recalculated release points, and executed an impossible strike, all while coordinating with ground forces, managing wingmen and monitoring the broader battlefield, because in combined operations under live fire, anticipation and split-second decision-making are as lethal as weapons themselves, and when a secondary unexpected threat emerged, an unmapped high-value target attempting to flee through civilian simulated zones, she adapted instantly, weaving through the terrain, timing ordnance release, and maintaining aircraft stability, neutralizing the threat without collateral damage, leaving observers whispering disbelief and admiration, because she had transformed chaos into control, uncertainty into precision, and skepticism into awe, and as tracer fire and simulated missile locks intensified, Kara executed evasive maneuvers that would have overwhelmed any ordinary pilot, rolling, pitching, banking and compensating for wind, altitude, and system limitations while maintaining perfect weapons lock and communicating continuously with allied units, because mastery requires fluidity under pressure and anticipatory execution beyond conventional limits, and when the final target appeared in a heavily defended compound, requiring simultaneous engagement of multiple objectives while avoiding civilian simulated zones and countermeasures, Kara calculated trajectories, altitude, and ordnance timing with millimeter accuracy, releasing each strike in perfect sequence while coordinating with ground forces and wingmen, leaving SEAL observers completely silent, because they realized that the female major had achieved what no one thought possible, turning the impossible into flawless execution, and as the last explosions faded and engines roared at reduced throttle, she looped for reconnaissance, scanning for secondary threats, ensuring friendly forces were unharmed, and adjusting flight paths for post-strike assessment, because in the ultimate test, vigilance never ends and mastery requires continuous attention, reflection and anticipation, and as she finally returned to base, taxiing smoothly, removing her helmet, sweat and adrenaline clinging, calm and composed, the SEALs could only stand in silent awe, their skepticism entirely erased, replaced by profound respect and lingering tension, because they had witnessed a pilot redefine the limits of what is achievable under extreme conditions, precision and stress, and while Kara had completed the ultimate test flawlessly, the quiet, unspoken question remained: what other challenges, scenarios or threats could ever push her beyond the limits she had already demonstrated, because in her mind anticipation, nerve and precision are never static, and as she stepped from the cockpit, smiling subtly but already analyzing what could come next, observers realized that Major Kara Viper Mitchell had not only proven herself as the most lethal, precise and anticipatory pilot they had ever seen, but had also left a lingering, subtle tension in the air, a quiet acknowledgement that her legend was just beginning, that the impossible was merely a challenge waiting for her to conquer it, and that no one, not even the most seasoned SEALs or allied pilots, could yet predict the heights she might reach, the scenario she could master, or the next impossible challenge she would transform into flawless execution, leaving every witness aware that mastery, anticipation, and nerve can redefine reality itself, while the horizon stretched endlessly before her, hinting at battles, challenges, and feats yet to come, unresolved, unseen, and waiting for the pilot who had already proven that limits exist only to be overcome.